Hello, everybody, and welcome to Keepin It Rural. Becca, myself, and Lindsay are super pumped to have Julie Tesch with us today. And Julie is the president and CEO, it's like a big job title, of the Center for Rural Policy and Development. And
Yay.
that might sound not exciting to some, but
or it sounds daunting.
Yes, it sounds like a really big responsibility, which it is. But we want to tell everyone about what Julie and her crew is up to and why this matters in rural America and rural Minnesota, where we're at, but rural America in general. Julie, one of the reasons that I am so interested in this, and I think a lot of other people will be as well, is because when you shared through social media how Amazon affects rural business, like that just really got my attention and had not been something I really thought that much about. And that's really played a really big part in my buying decisions to try to stay local. Even though I did that, like I didn't really realize the impact that it's having on my friends and neighbors in my rural community. And I thought that was really important. So I know that we're going to talk about that today. But first, Julie, tell us a little bit about your background and where you went to college, what you majored in, and then what other jobs you've had and how you got tied into the Center for Rural Policy and Development.
Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here. Yeah, I am with the Center for Rural Policy and Development. I'm the president and CEO, which basically means I run the joint, which is myself and two staff members, which are two researchers, and I have a board of 19 board members that are appointed by the governor, actually. But we'll get to that in a little bit. That's policy stuff. But I'm coming to you today from my family's farm in southern Minnesota near the town of Waldorf in Waseca County. And I grew up here on our dairy farm. We don't dairy anymore. We have corn and soybeans, but grew up here. And then I had the good fortune of going to the University of Minnesota. Twin Cities, actually St. Paul. Woohoo, go Gophers. St. Paul specifically, where I got to meet and be in the same sorority as the lovely Natasha Mortensen. Yes, and got my undergrad in applied economics, aka agricultural economics. And It is a wow that I graduated with that degree. I should not have been in that major, let me tell you. I don't like math. I failed calculus 3 times. We limped through, and I realized my 4th year, I was an exchange student in Switzerland and realized, you're really in the wrong major. It took me that long to figure it out. And I'm like, I really like people. Maybe I should go into education. Finished my applied economics degree, which I'm glad I did. I learned a lot. It's a great degree, great program, but yeah, I really stunk at it. But then I got my MED, my Master's of Education in Ag Ed, and with the goal of going into extension and doing 4-H work. And so that's what I did for a few years after I got done. And from there, went back to campus and worked with the Minnesota Ag Education Leadership Council for 9 years. Loved it. And then FFA came calling, and I moved to Indianapolis and ran their alumni. And then Washington, D.C. came calling. So I had to answer that. And so ended up working for American Farm Bureau in Washington, D.C. for 4 years, and I ran their foundation. So I didn't have to do policy stuff. I got to actually raise money and help do programming to help kids and teachers understand where their food comes from. 5 years ago.
You got to do the fun stuff.
I did. And then 5 years ago, I came back here.
Did you have a hard time moving home from D.C.?
Not really. I was ready. I liked the energy until I didn't, because it is dog eat dog. Thank goodness I grew up on a dairy farm and I know what busting my butt's like, but it's a different vibe out there. And I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it. And I'm glad that I was not in the policy world and on the Hill, in Congress. I have a lot of friends who were, and it's all just, what can you do for me?
Right.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me. I went to a women in agriculture social gathering shortly after I moved there. And I'm like, oh, this will be great. I'll meet some great people. And I did. But I was talking with a couple of younger, DC is run by 25-year-olds, in case you didn't know.
Literally.
Literally run by drunk or hungover 25-year-olds. It really is.
This is the best podcast ever.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, and I'm like, I was like elderly when I was out there. I'm like, my God, okay. I'm in my 30s at that time. Anyway, so I'm at this reception at this nice restaurant, and I go and talk to these 2 young women standing there, and they're like, oh, who are you with? I'm like, oh, American Farm Bureau. And their eyes light up. They're like, oh, what's your portfolio? And previous to this, I found out they were congressional staffers. They worked for some congressman or woman, whatever. And I'm like, oh, I run our foundation. And the look on their face was like, oh. Because they all wanted to know, what do you do? What can you do for us?
And you thought to yourself, you got no money for me, so I don't want to talk to you either.
Yeah, and I'm like, it's a great city, again, until it's not. It can steal your soul, and I always knew when it was time to travel and get out into rural America when seeing a homeless person would not bother me anymore.
Right.
I think seeing someone homeless on the street should bother you. You should have empathy. And when it just becomes part of the scenery and you don't even notice it anymore, that's sad. Coming back here, it was definitely a culture shock, but I was ready for it. I didn't realize until I moved back here how much I miss space and quiet. I lived in an apartment, a 16-story apartment building on the top floor, and I liked it. It was good, but my green space, no lie, was a Civil War cemetery. Like, that was the green space. That's where people walked their dogs, and so I was happy to come back to the farm and have space, be near family, and just quiet. There's not sirens, not planes. It's great.
So Julie, I came back ready to run for Senate or Congress or, the boxing gloves on. So I'm dying to hear your stories. Yes.
Like I said, I didn't work in politics. I love that town. I look at it as, hey, all of us high school policy nerds, that's like where we all end up. Ooh, we finally fit in. Yay. It's just a weird place. I will say, though, with agriculture, the ag kids stick together, which is really nice. It's funny. Sure. We end up at the same bars and restaurants. There might be a band playing somewhere and it's, they work for the ag committee and they're at the USDA and they're, with beef or pork. And so it's fun because you end up running in those same circles. We take care of each other in a way. So that's really nice and really rare out there as well. And, it was nice at American Farm Bureau. I could sit and have lunch with my coworkers and talk about artificially inseminating a cow. And nobody flinched. Right? It was great.
My favorite combo.
I know, so it was great. It was great.
That's good. So Julie, can you tell us, now that you're with the Center for Rural Policy and Development, what is the purpose of the center? What are they trying to do?
Yeah, good question. Basically, what they're trying to do is create research that is focused on rural Minnesota and dealing with policy. And so I like to use the example of healthcare. So we do more work at the state level. Healthcare looks different in Minneapolis, St. Paul than it does in Redwood Falls or Waseca, or Red Lake Falls, wherever. And so our research goes and specifically looks at the dynamics of rural Minnesota. So we have that research through a lens of rural. So for healthcare, a huge part of accessing healthcare in rural Minnesota is transportation, because you have to drive a distance and there's not public transportation most of the time. And so it's interesting. We did a report on rural healthcare access a couple of years ago, and talking about travel and transportation, and a lot of my metropolitan colleagues that I talked to, they had no clue. Why would they?
I bet.
They're like, we never thought of that. And so that's what we do with our research. I always say the data are the data, and we tell the story of the data, and with that rural bend, because one size doesn't fit all in policy. And I know it requires more work, but what works in Hopkins will not work in Hayfield. Or I shouldn't say will not, it might not. So that's what we do. We do that research through a lens of rural and trying to hit the issues that are most important, top of mind right now. I know a lot of people think that we do only agricultural research, and we don't. We do a little bit, but we have so many great organizations in the university and extension and everything else that does research. So we'll do some things on ag land transitions and stuff like that, but we just finished our fiscal year. So we say we're in a new fiscal year and a research year. And so this year we're going to be focusing on rural mental health, which obviously is very important, rural housing, because there's a huge housing shortage, workforce, and then also rural EMS, so emergency medical services, because if you're like me, living out on the farm, we have a volunteer fire department, and God bless them, we have some wonderful people who volunteer, but they're volunteers.
Yeah, you need advanced medical care.
Yeah, and so we're lucky because that, like, typically they're around, and I'm close to Mankato, Albert Lea, and Waseca and Owatonna, but somebody that's further out, what do you do? We did a brief report this last year on that, and we're going to jump into that even more.
That's really awesome.
Oh, yeah.
What about childcare? I know when Lindsay and Becca and I were talking about some of these things, I know childcare came up because I know in Morris, where I'm working, it's really tough for people to find daycare.
It's catching national attention, and I've seen it on the news, and it's something that everyone is worried about. But specifically, like how is rural being impacted?
Absolutely. It's been an issue for a decade, probably, but it was never seen as a workforce issue or an economic development issue. But until the pandemic hit, COVID came, and, you know, there wasn't childcare for frontline workers and everything. And then that's when people started paying attention, like, oh, shoot, I don't have staff because my staff can't find childcare. And so now it's a hot button issue, which is great, but it's been this way for a while. But okay.
Like add it to the list of things that COVID opened our eyes to, you know?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's never looked at as economic development, and now it is. So we have more businesses trying to figure out how they can help with childcare. But the biggest thing in rural childcare, the biggest difference between urban and rural is in urban, because there's a shortage in both. But urban, most kids will go to a childcare center. In rural, they're home based. So like family daycares and home daycares.
Yep.
So
that's
it's
a very big difference.
It's very
and I hadn't really thought about that.
And, you know, centers can spread their expenses around, you know, economies of scale. Where a family childcare, you have 6 kids or whatever, and you can only have so many infants or so many at this age.
Right.
And they have different regulations, and it can be expensive. People forget that this is a job that you would like to make money at, have a career at, make a living wage. And that doesn't happen a lot with family childcare providers. It just doesn't pencil out. But then if you're at a center, it's hard to find staff to be there to work. And, you know, they can't find the staff, but 2, if they do have it, they can make more money going somewhere else, you know? So the whole system is broke. But in rural, we really focus on the family childcare.
So what have you been doing to help that scenario, or promoting or change in policy?
Yeah, we were the canary in the coal mine about 5-6 years ago on this. And I was happy to hear last week I was on a bus tour with Tim Penny and the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation, and we were talking about childcare. And he referred to our organization and said, you know, they really wrote the Bible on rural childcare, you know, on the policy issues. I'm like, wow, that's great. And we're constantly in contact with legislators at the state level, but the federal level. Senator Tina Smith uses our stuff all the time. And a lot of it, you know, we encourage decision makers to use our research. We're nonpartisan, non-biased. And so we use that, you know, this is like the truth. This is not slanted. But I have legislators at the state level, especially now, saying, okay, Julie, we have all this data, now what? I'm like, that's not my job.
Yeah, that's your job.
That's why I voted you to go there. So for our organization, I ride a very thin line of providing research and advocacy, because we can't advocate, you know, for a position or a policy. We can make recommendations, and we have, you know, we're recommending this pod model for family childcare. So
which is interesting because Morris has been trying to use that model.
Yep. It's interesting. All this will all work out. I have hope. I know there's a lot of money being thrown at it, but it is a system problem. So we've highlighted all the problems, all the numbers, but now this is going to be talking about solutions and what are some ideas, you know, because every community is different. Now that people realize it's a workforce issue, you know, companies like Hormel are trying to figure out, dang, if we're going to keep employees, we need to offer this. How do we do that? You know, Land O'Lakes has a daycare center, childcare center. I don't know quite exactly how it all works. Larger companies are having to get more involved in things like that.
And they have a fitness center like right in there. It's amazing to me.
Right?
I know. And cafeteria, I just think, what?
Yeah, I wouldn't use it because it's too convenient.
Yeah, it's smart to have all that. Really,
it is.
Yeah.
Even in DC, it was amazing the child care centers they were putting in left and right. Even half of DC wasn't back to work yet. They were still all working from home.
I think in so many industries, it's time that we rethink the way that we've always viewed things, and it's, we've rushed into new technology and new things, but we forget about some of the systems that have stayed the same and we expect to continue working. And I feel like childcare is that.
Yeah, the basics, like you have to almost get back to that. And I bet you had that conversation a lot with people, Julie, is we need to get back to the basics. Like we need to have these basic things.
No doubt. And the thing is, I don't care if you live in rural, suburban, or inner city urban. We all value good healthcare access, good education, safety, childcare. We all value these same things. We just look at it in different lenses. And that's where the pushback comes. But it's going to look different. We all want good, adequate childcare all around. Interesting thing out in DC, though, too, is that the average age of a first-time mom out there is in the 30s. Because they're career women, and so it's different. It's different out there and how things look, and they have a career first, and they might have 1 or 2 kids or 2.5, whatever the average is. But yeah, it's different. It is different. And out there, DC is also working remote. I'll be curious how it all plays out. Will people just stay remote or not?
I don't know. The USDA building was a ghost town.
Yeah, federal government. Yeah, I don't think they're back yet.
No.
Yeah, or they're hybrid.
Speaking of something that we all care about, I have really been looking forward to asking you about the Amazon effect, because it is the #1 used app in a lot of people's phones. And my cart is constantly full. I never press actually send though, because I'm too indecisive to do that. But I think Amazon is so widely used. And I'm just curious, after your research came out, can you sum that up for us and what that looks like? And what are we doing that we're not realizing?
And what should young people be thinking about too as they're purchasing?
And how did this research start? Can you answer all 10 of those questions?
All those
questions.
Sure. I will give you the nutshell in saying we were surprised by the research. We were surprised by the data. We decided to do this research because we thought, hey, online shopping is really taking a hold in rural. And, our hypothesis was, I bet it's taking tax dollars away from the base. And we were completely wrong. And we used Amazon effect because it's a catchy name and because everyone uses Amazon, but it's all online shopping. There was a court case, Supreme Court case, I think it was 2017, I forget, but which really changed how taxes are collected. And it was the state of South Dakota against Wayfair, housing stuff. Previous to this, local municipalities could not collect sales tax. SECA could not collect sales tax. It would just go to the federal or state or whatever. After that now, taxes now get appointed when you shop online. So if I buy something from Amazon, or let's say Target, buy something from Target. My closest Target is Mankato. Mankato will get my taxes for that purchase. Where previously that was not the case. So it's really helped communities get more tax revenue. Tax revenues just keep on going up because we like to buy stuff. And if you have a local option sales tax, which mid-sized towns and larger towns have, it's great, because the people that are coming into your community. So say that even in Waseca, we have some gift shops. There's a little percentage of tax in there that goes back to the city, or the county. It depends upon how it's set up. Amazon effect, obviously people are buying more online, and during the height of the pandemic, that was the case. And I hate to say it, I've had 3 delivery trucks here today.
I
know who they are, but if they back up or not.
Because I forget.
Exactly.
So when you talk about the Amazon effect, and you're talking about the fact that Amazon is not tied to any specific community, so that money, you're paying money into blue sky. It's not returning to your community.
That was the case before the Supreme Court case a few years ago. That was the case. Now the community does get the tax, and it gets a little complicated in tax code. Natasha, you ordered something from Target.com, and you're like, I need to pick it up in Alexandria. Taxes for that purchase will be going to Alexandria because that is where you picked the stuff up at.
Okay.
If it was shipped to you in Morris, the tax in Morris would be charged. So fortunately, it is up to people way smarter than me that understand tax code and everything. So these companies have to keep track of all the taxes.
By delivery area.
By delivery, yes.
That's awesome.
It is. Now, so somebody like me in rural Waseca County, our little town of Waldorf, we don't have a local option sales tax, but the county does. And so the county will be able to, reap, what the 3 times that the UPS or FedEx truck was here today. There's the common belief that online shopping is killing Main Street, and that is partially true, but online shopping has also it's increased our tax bases considerably. And also with local shops, is trying to figure out how they can do business online. I know quite a few small businesses that their storefront is able to be open because their online business is so robust.
Some of that in Morris, yeah. And okay, so would you say online shopping really is pretty equal in going to the bigger town an hour away? It's the same concept, right?
Yeah, obviously, I think it's better to shop local. You know where your money's exactly going, but it's not as bad as we thought, if that makes sense, With
these taxes coming in now, it reminds me of that saying my mom always tells me, everything in moderation.
Exactly. I think of Waseca County and our tax revenues, I don't even have the numbers in front of me, but they've gone up exponentially, and we're able to do more road projects and bridge projects because of that, because of people shopping in Waseca or online shopping, picking stuff up at Walmart or wherever. So yeah,
I'm really
moderation.
impressed because, original numbers would be, money spent in your town goes around 7 times before it leaves your town. So that's 7 times taxable versus the online shopping. So I'm surprised that your study came out that equal.
Yeah.
Okay. So one more topic quick here. I'm wondering, because of the cost of farmland and especially young farmers getting started, and that it doesn't seem like anything's improving in that area. If that's something that you work on in your organization, understanding what's happening with farmland prices and just the cost of everything, how it goes up and up and up, it never goes back down again.
And is it really as impossible to start in this industry as everyone makes it seem?
Doesn't feel like it.
That is a case-by-case basis. Farming here is very different than getting started farming up in, Hubbard County. It's different. We did a research study called Stratosphere last year talking about increasing land prices. And this economy is not following what economists previously thought. I honestly thought we would be facing an 80s farm crisis, and I hope it doesn't happen. But interest rates were low, or have stayed low up until a few months ago, but prices kept on going up. The big difference now is a lot of people have cash. And you're seeing, I think of just a few miles away from us, there's a family, they used to live in Farmington, and they sold their land up there, for development. They have cash. They needed to reinvest it to avoid the taxes, and so they moved down here and bought. I do not foresee prices dropping considerably. We'll see how the interest rates are, but I get frustrated because it is hard for people to get in. It's hard for people to expand. And is it just going to be a whole lot of massively huge farms? I don't know, but
it's almost like it's forcing that to happen, though.
Exactly.
It is.
People get very upset about that, but then something's got to give, because only the people with the larger amounts of capital and assets can afford to do anything.
Exactly. And what I think is scarier even, and we had this as a topic on our thought leader survey, so we determined what we're going to research by asking 2,000 people across the state on rural, and we put on there a topic about investor landowners from out of state and doing a study on that. It didn't rank very high, but maybe next year it will. But that is something that concerns me, is these investor landowners, whether they're in state or out of state, that are coming in and buying piece by piece, 80 acres at a time. That they can afford to pay $15,000 you hear about Bill Gates. There's a lot of Bill Gateses out there that are just scooping up farmland.
Yeah. And who
So
knows what's going to happen, right? Because they're going to own it.
Yeah, I think about it, and if you own land, it's a very personal thing. In our family, my ancestors homesteaded around here, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon, but in another 100 years, I have no clue. But,
yeah, because you don't know who's going to own it then.
Depending upon if people want money or not, they'll go to the highest bidder. So there's an investor that's offering, $2,000 an acre over what the neighbor is offering. I would hope that they would take the neighbor's offer because you want to support your neighbor, but money talks.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at now.
Exactly.
It does. And even people that aren't happy about it, they still do it.
I fault them for it. I can't fault them for it, especially in agriculture, in animal agriculture. Again, growing up on a dairy farm, we did not have much money. And, this is like, for my grandparents, when my parents bought the farm from them, that was their retirement. My parents buying the farm was their retirement. That was their IRA, basically. So,
all their assets are tied up.
And no matter how big things get, I think there's something to be said for keeping things personable and knowing who's on the other end of your dollar. And no matter what it is, not just farming, not just food, everything. And I think that there's something to be said for that.
No doubt. And just being conscious of that.
Yes. Julie, this has been amazing. And we have appreciated this so much. I'm foreseeing that we will have you again if you will come.
Absolutely.
Please do. I would love it. You guys are awesome.
It's just unbelievable for me. I don't think about all these things that are happening out there and think about how can we actually move the needle in policy in rural areas, because it's very difficult, but your organization is what's going to help us do that. And I think that that's really awesome. So thank you so much for all the work you do.
Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that because research often gets overlooked all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, it sure does. And it's a lot of work.
So frustrating.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Julie, last question. This podcast is called Keepin It Rural, right? So us three, we keep it rural in lots of ways, but how do you keep it rural?
We have a vegetable garden or a vegetable farm just a couple miles south of us, a 3-acre garden, and they do CSAs and sell at the local farmers market. And my dad has been helping out there picking stuff, and they call it hyper local. So I keep it rural it's almost like it's hyper local. I am canning my beets today from the garden, and I'm going to do onions and go to the county fair.
Yes,
it's fair season. That's how I keep it rural. County fair season. Bring it on. I love me a county fair, and I'm excited for the state fair.
Oh, me too. I can't wait. Oh, we're so grateful that you had time for us today, Julie. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, you guys. Thank you so much.
It's not a party without you there. Follow our crazy on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to check out all episodes and extras at keepinitruralgirls.com.
Until next time, keep it rural.
It's time to pour on the fire and call in the dogs. That's all, folks.